Doctors of Reddit, what are some of your worst experiences with anti-vaxxers? I'm a doc and 2 months ago I'm walking out of the hospital and besides me is a woman. Frantically dialing a number on her telephone. She proceeds to start yelling into her phone. They want to put all those nasty chemicals into him. They say if he's going to be in the hospital he needs to be vaccinated to protect other kids. It's poison. I'm going to take him somewhere else. When we got to the sidewalk she immediately reached into her purse and pulled out a cigarette and started smoking. I just stood there watching her yell about poisonous chemicals in vaccines while she puffed furiously on a cigarette. You honestly can't make this shit up. After I sent out invites to my kid's birthday party, I found out one of her friends from dance was unvaccinated. My daughter's best friend is in remission from leukemia and is immunocompromised. An unvaxxed kid could heal her. I uninvited the dance kid and very nicely explained the situation. Her mother loses her shit and tries to get us kicked out of the dance school they attend. The dance school owner is an older lady and had no idea there were idiots these days that didn't vax, so she implemented a new rule that students had to be up to date and the unvaxxed kid had to find a new dance school. I felt bad for the kid, but her mother is a sociopath. Herd immunity saves lives when it comes to kids fighting cancer. Yeah. I'd rather my child get sick naturally than be exposed to chemical vaccines, a parent. After I spent 10 minutes describing to her in graphic detail all of the ways preventable diseases could maim and kill her infant. My mom did not vaccinate me as a kid. As of 2 days ago I officially have rubella. I have a feeling that in 10 years, we're going to have a lot more stories like yours here. While discussing vaccines with a mom one time and bringing up my experience working with the immunocompromised population, she said, I don't care if someone else's kid has cancer. That's their problem, not mine. And that right there is a huge part of the problem, selfishness. I vaccinate my children not only for their own health, but for the health of others. I'm an EMT and pro-vaccine. My ex-wife is an anti-vaxxer. We are constantly arguing about vaccinating my son, but thankfully I have custody of him so he gets his vaccines. She also thinks the government puts fluoride in the water to control our minds. Not a doctor, but my 8th grade English teacher was anti-vax and pregnant at the time. She would constantly tell us about how bad vaccines were and stuff. So one day the science teacher spent an entire lesson just talking to us about how vaccines are good and don't cause autism. A few years later I was talking to my friend from 8th grade who still talks to our science teacher. And he said that the English teacher's baby had autism and wasn't vaccinated. Edit. Wording. There was an anti-vax mom who brought her kid into the ER and demanded that her kid be roomed right away and seen first because he couldn't be around all these sick kids. I commented on a blatantly false post about vaccines on Facebook. Something about mercury in vaccines, I think. Now there's only mercury in the flu shot. And you can request a dose without it. She sent me an article on how God doesn't want you to vaccinate children. She said she felt like God was leading her to spread anti-vax information. Yikes. Pretty sure God would want less dead kids, but okay. I'm a veterinarian. Every day I have to convince some reluctant pet owner that I'm not in the pocket of big rabies and I'm making recommendations for preventative care based on state law, medical research and good judgment. The memorable people are the ones who listen to me. My advice saves their pet's life in one way or another. And they're still pissed about it. Your dog definitely needs a Lyme vaccine. Why? It's not perfect. Your last dog died of Lyme nephritis like 2 months ago. This vaccine is 93% effective. Some people. I'm not a doctor, but I do have mild autism. I made the mistake of saying that I was autistic in a public place to my friend. This lady heard and came up to ask if I was vaccinated. I said that I was. And she had the most triumphant look on her face. I realized my mistake and left right away with my friend. I went to a school that is known for its nursing program. So we had a lot of student nurses and RNs who would come back from their internships and jobs with anti-vaxxer stories. The worst one by far was a student who met a mother who also happened to be in nursing school. That explained that she would not be vaccinating any of her children and was mad she had to get a tuberculosis vaccine to work in a hospital. The student spent about 30 minutes trying to explain to this mother that she could easily heal her kids. To which she told her, at least they'll die naturally and not of mercury poisoning. Edit, the mother was confusing a TB test with a TB vaccine. Here's one. Kid comes in after a fall and gets scraped by some rusty nails. Surprisingly is okay after the fall. We want to give the tetanus vaccine since that's common to do after high risk exposure to make sure she doesn't get it. Learn she's never been vaccinated. Mom refuses. Call CPS but mom is connected to some big shot gov official. Kid goes home without vaccine. 3 weeks later. Kid comes back in with tetanus, unable to breathe. Suffers irreversible brain damage. Now she is wheelchair bound and needs to be fed through a tube. Edit, this was not in the US. I'd imagine CPS in the US wouldn't care if you were connected to some high level government official and would have let us vaccinated. I'm not a doctor but I work in an urgent care clinic. I had a mom come in that complained about her son having nasty eye infections, pink eye lasting several weeks. She was vehemently against vaccinations, and when I asked if she had been giving her son over-the-counter meds she said, well, I read online that breast milk would work so I've been just pouring it in his eyes and I don't know why it's not working. Edit, a word. Well, we do have a measles epidemic around here every few years or so. Children die. It's getting worse. But I do believe the worst was my mother, pediatrician, coming home worried one day because Child Protective Services are looking into her. Why? She diagnosed an unvaccinated child with pertussis. Turned pale. Told the mother she is to immediately to go an infectious ward. Called it in, like you do with most of these disease. Just procedure. And then. The mother was never registered at a hospital. She just sank back into a minority part of town. I don't think my mother has still seen those patients again. It's likely the child survived or there would have been some sort of murmur. But yeah. Family physician here. It's not nearly as dramatic as you'd think. I tell mom what vaccines are due. And if she declines or delays them, I ask why. Whatever answer she gives, I tell her that her conclusion is not evidence-based and vaccines are beyond safe. If she still says no, I move on. I encourage her to return anytime to complete the vaccine series if she changes her mind. I try not to be judgy because that only reinforces the resistance. I live in California, so declining vaccines is sadly become more common. I'm a psychologist who works with kiddos who have developmental delays such as autism. Every couple of months I have parents who think that vaccinations cause their child to have autism. I present the facts but ultimately they are not really interested in hearing the reality. Sometimes I think they just need something to blame. I can't say I wouldn't find something to blame if I had a child with autism. It is heartbreaking. My stepmom is a pediatrician at a major hospital here in Italy. She told me the worst thing she saw was her anti-vaxxer mom wailing and screaming after her 12-year-old son died of meningitis. The mother didn't let the son get the meningitis vaccine. Stepmom told me as soon as she walked in the room after getting pulled for an emergency, all the son's limbs had gone necrotic and he was bleeding from practically every hole in his body including his eyes since his blood couldn't congeal anymore and was like oil leaking all over. She told me she felt so pissed at the mom when she received the information that the mom hadn't vaccinated her son at all and this was all preventable. I got slapped by a mom for disagreeing with her course of action. We've shamed people into recycling, picking up dog poop, and not littering. For the common good. I super judge anyone walking their dog without a plastic bag. I hope we can get to a place where we consider vaccinations a similar public good and refusal to participate is considered selfish and antisocial for similar reasons. Medical professional, not a doctor, and MPH student here. I'm visiting my family in a rural part of the US. After a couple years of being away, Explaining to them why they need their flu shots and why my 2-week-old niece should be vaccinated has become completely exhausting. I haven't got the flu shot in years and I never get sick. That's not how it works. Just gonna say there should be a law that makes it mandatory for everyone to get needed vaccines. There is no law, but I know that there are public schools that won't let you go if you haven't had certain vaccinations. My school is supposed to have mandatory vaccines, but people will just say they don't for religious reasons, even though most of them aren't religious in the slightest, and they get a pass. Pediatrician here. As a medical student, I watched a baby die from rotavirus. BC mom thought vaccines cause Alzheimer's. Yeah? Not autism. Alzheimer's, and she didn't think he needed to go to the hospital when he hadn't kept down a feeding for 12 hours, because sometimes kids just do that. My current winner is a mom who refuses vaccines for her kids because they cause autoimmune disorders. Her 2 sisters have chronic Lyme and her brother has scoliosis. All due to those nasty vaccines. Oh, and her grandpa and dad both died from heart attacks because they had had the flu vaccine the previous season. All these autoimmune disorders in one family. I just don't know what to do. She likes to bring me articles from Mercola and Health Nut News to prove her point. This will get buried. But pediatrician here. I was talking with a parent who refused to vaccinate and was kicked out of other practices as a result, and tried to reassure them about safety. Their response: I'm not going to go to the corner drug dealer to find out if heroin is safe to use. I went and took Milo to get her flu shot the other day, and somehow me and my family doctor got on the topic of anti-vaxxers. She's been my doctor since I was born and now is my daughter's doctor, so I know her well, and on top of that she's very candid. She told me that every child in her practice is vaccinated, and if a parent refuses, after she tries to clear up their misguidance, to do so she advises them to seek another doctor because she doesn't work with child abusers. She says they usually don't come back after that. Lol. I mean, I agree though. I personally think there should be a list of mandatory vaccines that if not met the guardian can be charged with child neglect. It actually kind of blows my mind this isn't the law already. Not a doctor but a medic. Had a kid fall down onto hot radiator heater at home. 2nd to 3rd degree burns all over his back. Kid is screaming in agony, but I managed to place the line in and sedate him. We are off to the burn center. PD escort in place, and I start asking mom about medical history, vaccinations, etc. She says that they don't do vaccines because that would kill the baby. So we get to the burn center and I'm getting one-on-one with the doc and give him history and whatever else he needs. He lost his shit when he heard that kid hasn't been vaccinated. He said that the mother successfully just gave her son every contagious disease in that place. I'm not a doctor but a nurse and had a whole family with measles, and they blamed the government and Obama for their illnesses. After reading all these, I am completely in favor of a law that would find parents guilty of manslaughter if their child dies from a disease that they weren't vaccinated for because of the parent's decision not to. I'm a mid student. A substantial number of my fellow students don't want to get vaccinated against the flu. The same goes for many nurses around here. One colleague of mine said she didn't get the flu vaccine because there could be aluminium in it. Just read the ducking label. Karen. There's no aluminium in a flu vaccine. And even if you're a goddamn mid student, you should know better than this.